wherever you are, warm welcome to our today's session titled as Vulnerability to Sustainability, the Journey of Climate Migrants. In this third Gobeshona Global Conference, thanks again for joining us today. We will start our session with the thanks note to the International Center for Climate Change and Development and Independent University for providing us the opportunity to host this session in this global conference. Well, our session is scheduled to go up to 12:30 Bangladesh time. We will take 5 minutes for a quick intro to our whole session. Just to inform you that today we have a very good blended panel members, including academicians and practitioners. And it's really a good gender balanced team as well. And you will be hearing both men and women voice almost equally. We will start with our session with kicking off by initiating the dynamics of climate-induced migration. And then we will hear the insight from our climate migrants, their life experiences, or loss and damage, climate change, how it affected their life and livelihoods, and eventually influences their unplanned decision on migration. And then we will have our first round of panel discussion. In here, the first round, our honorable panel member will be reflecting individually. And in the second round, they will be interacting with each other and of course, responding to our question from the audience. And before going to the main session, I would like to take the privilege to introduce a short introduction of our honorable panel members. Today, we have our first panel member, Mr. Mohammad Samsuddoha, Chief Executive Center for Participatory Research and Development. Our second panel member is Ms. Heather Magre, Director of Climate Justice Resilience Fund. And our third panel member, Professor Mizanar Khan, Deputy Director, International Center for Climate Change and Development, and Program Director of Least Developed Countries University Consortium on Climate Change. Welcome all the panelists, facilitator, moderators, and of course, our most valuable guest from our community members and our respected audience. Hopefully, we'll all have a good and interactive discussion today. But before that, my last message from my end that please keep yourself muted when you are not speaking during the session. And it will be appreciated if you can turn on your video. You know that it is always nice and lively to see the faces from different corners. Thank you. So as per the design, we will start with setting the notion of the discussion and setting the thematic outline. To do this, I would like to invite Mushrat Hassan Imon, Technical Officer, Migration, Helvetas with Intercorporation. Would you please unmute yourself and take the floor? You have roughly 10 minutes to go. Over to you.
Is it full screen now today? I'm not sure.
No, it's still, you have to go to the,
okay.
Yes, now it's full screen, you are audible.
Thanks, Mohammed Adi. I would like to welcome everyone to the session and good morning to you all. This is Mushrat Hassan Imon. I am here to present the most pressing issues of our times, climate change. And Bangladesh is one of the most affected by climate change and its adverse impact across the world. And in the recent years, climate-induced migration has become a significant issue and concern for Bangladesh. And in my presentation today, I'll be focusing on the loss and damage caused by the climate change and its impact on climate-induced migration. So according to the Global Climate Risk Index 2021, Bangladesh is ranked 7 among the countries most affected by climate change. And the latest IPCC report indicated a warming of 0.44 degrees Celsius to 0.69 degrees Celsius by 2030. And it will rise up to 1.3 to 2 degrees Celsius by 2050. And a report revealed from the World Bank, I'm not sure why the presentation is not moving, but yeah, I can move forward. So according to a World Bank report, if the sea level rise up to 6%, sea level rise up to 1 meter, 13.3 million people would be displaced, and the country would lose 6% of its land area. And based on an internal displacement monitoring center report, Bangladesh has the highest number of new displacement due to the disaster in the world in 2019, with over 4.5 million people being displaced. So climate-induced migration is a direct consequence for Bangladesh in the recent years, and it is mainly driven by the several disasters like floods, cyclones, and the sea level rise. So if we look at the cyclone Cedar that happened in 2007, it affected over 8 million people, and it causes damage of over $1.7 billion. And these several disasters have resulted in loss and damage to the infrastructure, the livelihood, crops, homes, health, and basic services. And that also lead to the displacement of people. And they also face the lack of social and legal recognition at their communities and the destination. Sometimes, or most of the time, they also face the discrimination because of their economic condition, their race, their sex, gender, and so on. And they also lived in an inadequate living condition at their destinations. And I would like to say it's inhuman sometimes. Besides, they also face the different forms of violence also, including the gender-based violence, the sex trafficking, human trafficking, child abuse, harassment, and child labor also. And as they left behind their families and communities, they have also gone through a psychological trauma across the time. So there are so many economic and non-economic impact of the loss and damage to the climate migrants so far. And the people who are displaced, they are forced to migrate to the basically in the nearby division and districts, mostly in the rural settings. And they also migrate to the urban area also, urban and semi-urban, but in the nearby districts, and they are working in the agriculture and the fisheries and the labor-intensive works. So most of them are the male. Is containing 72% based on our report that we have worked with the people so far in 2021 to till date, and the women are 28%. And the typical occupations are including the agriculture, fishing, and the labor-intensive work in different areas. Basically, the development projects run by the government and private sector, different economic zone, the rickshaw pulling in the cities also. And yeah, you all know that Dhaka and the other big cities are flooded with the migrants across the Bangladesh. So most of the migrants have not received education beyond their primary level, that also leading to limited employment opportunities. But usually these individuals migrate temporarily and later return to pursue other forms of work in their community the rest of the time. Their season starts from the beginning of April to April, and it's end at the December and the nearby months. And their income is not
Imon Bhai, sorry for interruption. Your slide is not moving. Can you please make the slideshow off and on again?
Yeah.
You are still on the slide 2. Sorry for the interruption. Yes.
No, I know that, but it was not moving then. That's why I just go forward. But it's moving
no
now.
problem. Yes, now it's moving. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, fine. Okay. So most of the migrants have not received their education beyond their primary level. That also leading to limited employment opportunities, as they have not the set of technical skills also. So the labor-intensive work is the main occupations for the seasonal employment. So their monthly income is not too high so far. It ranges from the 10,000 to 15,000 Bangladeshi taka, but the average is close to 9,000 so far. So to address the issues of the climate migrants in Bangladesh, basically in the coastal area, Helvetas is working to support the climate migrants, focusing the loss and damage. It was first ever loss and damage funded by the Scottish government, and the fund was channelized by the Climate Justice Resilient Fund. To help these individuals, the climate migrants, Helvetas is providing the reskilling of the migrants and some provisions of the alternative livelihood options with a focus on the climate regional livelihood on the agriculture and the fisheries sector at the coastal belt, help them to plan relocation or the assisted migration and other forms of activities that could have support the migrants in the coastal area basically. And our working area is on the Pagasa Koira and the Moralganj Upazila of the two different districts of Khulna, is Bagarat and Khulna itself a district. So, despite these efforts, mass work remains to be done in order to fully address the issues of the climate migrants. And the loss and damage caused by the climate change have resulted in the displacement of millions of people and the number will be increased in the coming years. And there are several predictions I have told earlier in the presentation from the beginning. So yeah, I think the global community and Bangladesh is aware on that, and Bangladesh government is also taking some steps to address the issues by implementing some adaptation and mitigation measures. And there are some sort of policies in our country, the Mujib Climate Prosperity Plan, the National Adaptation Plan, the 8th Year Plan, and there are so many plans in Bangladesh, we all know, but the efforts are not that level. And I would like to say the execution is not in the coastal level so far. And we all know that very well. And the advocacy efforts are from the CSOs is ongoing effort. So, however, I think the collective effort is needed from the global community, though the global community is the debating, negotiating, and planning as well. But the impact is going on is every year, and the frequent disasters have resulted the $1 million of loss in Bangladesh. So to address the issues, I think the support from the global community is necessary, and also the government as well to prevent further loss and damage. So I think this is all from my side, and I'm stopping there. But before that, we will go to Momitati. I'll to rewind the slides for a few minutes. These are some few information as the slide was not moving well. That was, I think, it's a technical glitch. So this is from my side as well. So I'm stopping there, handing over to Momitati. Thank you.
Thank you, Iman Bhai, for your insightful contribution. And technical glitch is a part of the process, when we're conducting an online session. So it's no issue. I can't agree with you more with you that loss and damage is already evident on the ground, and our community people from South affecting in every sector, as you said. So, actually, the community are suffering and going through this situation, we need to hear from them to actually see the real picture on the ground. We can see the data, the graph, the picture, but we cannot feel them if we don't hear from them. So luckily, today we have two community members with us. The first one is Ms. Rosina Akhtar from Paikgacha, Khulna, and second person is Mr. Helal Hauladar from Moralganj, Bagerhat, to take part in this discussion. So for your information, I will switch to Bangla now for the convenience of our community members. Then I will translate for them who are not Bengali speakers. স্বাগত জানাচ্ছি রোজিনা আপা এবং হেলাল ভাইকে আমাদের আজকের অনুষ্ঠানে আসার জন্য এবং আপনাদের মূল্যবান সময় দেওয়ার জন্য আগাম ধন্যবাদ জানাচ্ছি। আপনাদের সাথে সরাসরি আলোচনায় যাওয়ার আগে আমি একটু আপনাদের সাথে শেয়ার করছি যে এতক্ষণ ধরে ইমন ভাই এবং আমরা সবাই কি আলোচনা করছিলাম। আপনারা জানেন যে আমাদের এই জলবায়ু পরিবর্তনের দ্বারা শুধু বাংলাদেশ না, সারা পৃথিবী আসলে এটাতে আলোড়িত, এবং আমাদের দক্ষিণ পশ্চিম অঞ্চলের যে অংশগুলো রয়েছে এবং যে মানুষগুলো রয়েছে তাদের জনজীবনের যে ক্ষয়ক্ষতি এবং দুর্ভোগ, সেই জলবায়ু পরিবর্তনের আলোচনাই আমরা করছিলাম। আপনারা জানেন যে এই জলবায়ু পরিবর্তনের কারণে, প্রাকৃতিক দুর্যোগের কারণে যে দক্ষিণ পশ্চিমাঞ্চলে যে প্রাকৃতিক দুর্যোগের অহরহ প্রাকৃতিক দুর্যোগ হচ্ছে এবং এটার জন্য সুপেয় পানির আধারগুলো নষ্ট হয়ে যাচ্ছে, আমাদের ফসলাদি নষ্ট হচ্ছে এবং নদী ভাঙ্গনের কারণে যে আবাদি জমিগুলো তলিয়ে যাচ্ছে, মানুষের জীবিকা হারাচ্ছে এবং সর্বোপরি এই জীবিকা হারানো মানুষগুলো দিনে দিনে শহরমুখী হচ্ছে, অপরিকল্পিত অভিবাসনের দিকে যাচ্ছে। আমরা সেগুলো নিয়ে আলোচনা করছিলাম এবং আমরা খুব ভালো করেই জানি যে এই যে মানে অনিয়মিত অভিবাসন বা জনজীবনের দুর্ভোগ, সেগুলোর মধ্য দিয়ে আপনারা যাচ্ছেন এবং এখনো যাচ্ছেন। তো সেগুলো নিয়ে আমরা আসলে আলোচনা করব। তো আমি প্রথমে রোজিনা আপার কাছে আসতে চাচ্ছি। রোজিনা আপা, আপনি প্লিজ একটু আনমিউট করেন, আমাকে শুনতে পাচ্ছেন নিশ্চয়ই? রোজিনা আপা, আপনার কাছে আমার প্রথম প্রশ্ন, যে জলবায়ু পরিবর্তনের কারণে যে আপনার এবং আপনার পরিবারের উপর যে ক্ষয়ক্ষতিগুলো হচ্ছে, সেগুলোতে আপনার জীবিকায় কি কি প্রভাব রাখছে বা রেখেছে এবং এখনো রাখছে, যদি আমাদেরকে একটু বলেন।
মনে করেন কষ্ট দুঃখ, মনে করেন আমাদের আইলার পানি এসে মনে করেন ঘর বাড়ি অথবা হাঁস মুরগি অনেক কিছুই ক্ষয়ক্ষতি হয়েছে। মনে করেন বাচ্চা কাচ্চা নিয়ে খুব কষ্টের দিন কাটাতে হতেছে। খাওয়া দাওয়া এক হপ্তাহ হয় না, তার জন্য মনে করেন খুব কষ্ট করতে হয়। এই আইলার পানি দুর্যোগের কারণে মনে করেন খুব কষ্টকারী করি থাকা লাগে, খোলা আকাশের নিচে 20-25 দিন থাকা লাগে। ওইভাবে খাওয়া দাওয়ারও কোনো সিদ্ধান্ত হয় না, কোনো কিছুই চিন্তায় বলছে না। মনে করেন কি হবে কি করবে এই চিন্তায় মনে করেন ভোগ করে যেতে হইতেছে।
আপা, আমি আপনাকে একটু জিজ্ঞেস করি, আইলা এবং সিডরের আগে আপনি এবং আপনার স্বামী কি কাজ করতেন? মানে
কৃষি কাজ করতো। মনে করেন অনেক সুখে ছিলাম তখন বাচ্চা কাচ্চা নিয়ে। আইলার পরে এসে মনে করেন এই ঘর বাড়ি মনে করেন যা কিছু ছিল কাজকর্ম যেভাবে চলতো ওইভাবে আর করা যায় না, করতেই পারে না। যে মালিকের কাজ করবে সে মালিকের তো আইলার পানি এসে মনে করেন তার কোনো চাষবাস হচ্ছে না, কিছু করতে পারতেছে না। তাহলে সে বাড়িওয়ালা বা অথবা আমি কিভাবে কাজ করব?
সে কৃষি কাজ করছে না, তাহলে এখন কি করছেন উনি? মানে কৃষি জমিগুলো এখন সে কিভাবে ব্যবহার করছেন?
সে ব্যবহার করে মানে ঘের ফাড়ি করে,
মাছের ঘের।
হ্যাঁ মাছের ঘের করতেছে।
তাহলে আপা এখন আপনি কি করেন? কৃষি কাজে কাজ করতে পারছেন না?
এখন মনে করেন ভাটায় চলে গেছি, ভাটায় কাজকর্ম করি। ভাটায় মনে করেন
ইটের ভাটায় কাজ করছেন?
ইটের ভাটায় মনে করেন বাচ্চা কাচ্চা নিয়ে লেখাপড়া শিখুতি ভাতিনি বাদ দিয়ে রেখে মনে করেন ভাটাই চলে গেছি বাচ্চা কাচ্চা নিয়ে। ওই জায়গায় কাজকর্ম করে খাই। যে কাজের মূল্য সে মূল্য মনে করেন দেয় না, আর যে চুক্তি করে নিয়ে যায় সে সর্দার সে টাকাও দেয় না। তারপরেও সে জায়গায় কাজ করতে হয় যে না, গ্রামেও তো কাজ নেই, যাই খাবো কি। সে জায়গায় মনে করেন বাচ্চা কাচ্চা নিয়ে থাকাও নিরাপদ হয় না। অনেক ছেলে মেলে ধূমপান করে, সিগারেট টিগারেট খাই বেড়ায়, নিজের ছেলে মেয়ের নিজে কন্ট্রোলে রাখতে পারি না। বাথরুম মনে করেন যাই সিরিয়াল দিতে আই, একটা ভাটার ভিতরে মনে করেন অনেকগুলো লোক থাকে, সে জায়গায় মানে কোনো নিজের ইচ্ছা মতন কিছু করা যায় না। সেখানে যাই মনে করেন দাঁড়াই থাকতে হয় ঘন্টার পর ঘন্টা।
আপা, কতদিন থাকেন? বছরে কয়বার যান আপনি ভাটায় কাজ করতে? 6 মাস
থাকি।
এগুলো কোথায়? মানে কোন শহরে নাকি?
মনে করেন ঢাকায় নবীনগর।
আচ্ছা আচ্ছা, ঢাকায় যান।
সে জায়গায় আমরা ছিলাম, আমার শরীর খারাপ বলে আমি চলে আসি, এক সপ্তাহ আবার চলে যাবো। সে জায়গায় ছেলে মেয়ে আছে,
আচ্ছা
বাড়িওয়ালা আছে।
আচ্ছা আপা, যখন 6 মাস পর আবার গ্রামে ফিরে আসেন তখন কি করেন?
তখন কোনরা মনে করেন টুকটাক করে দিন আদায় খেয়ে খাই, মনে করেন কিছু কাজকর্ম যখন হয় যাই করি, এইভাবে চলতে থাকে।
আচ্ছা, কাজ করতে গেলে আপনি বললেন যে মজুরি ঠিক মতো পান না, বাট এছাড়া আর কোনো সামাজিক সমস্যা আপনি কখনো মুখোমুখি হয়েছেন? শারীরিক
মনে করেন বাচ্চা কাচ্চা নিয়ে মনে করেন সম্পর্ক মনে করেন এখন তো অনেক কিছু করে ছেলে মেয়ে, সেসব দিকতেও খুব কষ্ট করে থাকতে হয়। বাচ্চা কাচ্চা নিয়ে কত সময় নিজে খেয়াল করে পারা যায়।
আচ্ছা আচ্ছা আপা, তাহলে আপনার এখন সময়টা এরকম যে 6 মাস শহরে যাচ্ছেন আর 6 মাস গ্রামে থাকছেন, এভাবেই জীবন চলছে?
হ্যাঁ।
আচ্ছা আপা, অনেক ধন্যবাদ আপনাকে। আপনি আমাদের সাথেই থাকুন, আপনার কাছে আমি আবার আসব। এখন একটু হেলাল ভাইয়ের কাছে যাচ্ছি। হেলাল ভাই, আমাকে নিশ্চয়ই শুনতে পাচ্ছেন?
হ্যাঁ, শুনতে পাচ্ছি, ধন্যবাদ আপনাকে।
হেলাল ভাই, আপনার কাছেও আমার একই প্রশ্ন দিয়ে শুরু করতে চাই যে জলবায়ু পরিবর্তনের কারণে এবং অহরহ প্রাকৃতিক দুর্যোগের কারণে আপনার এবং আপনার পরিবারের জীবনে যে ক্ষয়ক্ষতি হচ্ছে এবং আপনার জীবিকার উপর যে প্রভাব ফেলছে সেটা নিয়ে আমাদেরকে কিছু বলেন।
হ্যাঁ, জলবায়ু পরিবর্তনের কারণে আমাদের পরিবারে অনেক ধরনের ক্ষয়ক্ষতি হয়েছে। তার ভিতরে অন্যতম হচ্ছে বন্যায় আমাদের বাসায় পানি উঠে গেছিল, তারপরে আমাদের ঘরের চালা উঠে নিয়ে গেছিল, তারপর আমাদের পুকুরে মাছ ছিল, তা সব ভেসে গিয়েছিল। এবং আমাদের আবাদি অনেক জমি ছিল, সেগুলোর ফসল সব নষ্ট হয়ে গেছে। আমাদের গরু ছিল, ছাগল ছিল, সেগুলো মারা গেছিল। তারপরে আমাদের আরো অনেক ক্ষতি হয়েছিল, যেমন আমাদের এলাকায় কোনো কাজ ছিল না তখন, বন্যার পরে কোনো কাজই ছিল না। তারপরে সেক্ষেত্রে আমার বাবা বাইরে যেয়ে কাজ করতো, আমিও মাঝে মাঝে যেতাম, আমারও যাওয়া লাগতো, বাবা পারতো না, এটার ইনকাম দিয়ে হতো না, আমাদের সংসার চলতো না, এজন্য আমিও বাইরে যেতাম। এবং এই জন্য আরো অনেক সমস্যার সম্মুখীন হয়েছি আমরা। সাধারণত পড়াশোনা বন্ধ হয়ে যায়, তারপরে ঠিক মতো মানে খাওয়া দাওয়া হইতো না, তারপরে এরকম অনেক ধরনের সমস্যার সম্মুখীন হয়েছি আমরা।
আচ্ছা ভাই, আপনি যে বললেন যে এই যে মানে বিশেষ করে বন্যা মানে সিডর আইলার পরে হচ্ছে আপনাদের আবাদি ফসলগুলো নষ্ট হয়ে যায়,
হ্যাঁ,
মাছের
হ্যাঁ,
ক্ষেত্রে সব নষ্ট হয়ে যায়।
নষ্ট
এরপর
হয়ে
আসলে
গেছে।
আপনি কি করেন? আপনি এবং আপনার পরিবার তখন কিভাবে জীবিকা নির্বাহ করলেন?
হ্যাঁ, এরপরে আমার বাবা বাইরে যেয়ে কাজ করতো, আমিও মাঝে মাঝে যেতাম বাইরে, আমারও কাজ করা লাগতো। তারপরে অনেক কষ্টের মানে সংসার চলতো তখন।
কি ধরনের কাজ করতেন ভাই বাইরে যখন যেতেন?
বাইরে যেতাম যখন, তখন কাজ করতাম মাটি কাটা, ধান কাটা, এইসবই করা হইতো।
আচ্ছা
হ্যাঁ।
আচ্ছা, তাহলে এখন কি করছেন আপনি?
এখন পানি জীবন প্রকল্পের মাধ্যমে আমাকে একটা ট্রেনিং দেওয়ার মাধ্যমে আমি অনেক ভালো হয়েছে আমার জন্য অনেক। আমি এখন এলাকায় থাকতে পারতেছি, মানে জেলার বাইরে আগে কাজ করতাম, এখন যাওয়া লাগে না, এখন আমি এলাকায় থেকে কাজ করতে পারি এবং তা থেকে মাসে আমার 7,000 টাকার মতো ইনকাম হয়। এটা থেকে আমি আমার ফ্যামিলিকে আমি অনেক বড় ধরনের একটা সাপোর্ট দিতে পারতেছি।
কিসের ট্রেনিং নিয়েছেন যদি একটু জিজ্ঞেস করি?
হ্যাঁ, ইলেকট্রিক্যাল।
ইলেকট্রিক্যাল ট্রেনিং।
হ্যাঁ,
এখন আপনি নিজেই আপনার গ্রামেই থাকেন, কিন্তু আগে যখন বাইরে যেতেন সেটার মজুরি কি পর্যাপ্ত ছিল না?
না
মানে
সেটা পর্যাপ্ত
মানে
ছিল
আমি
না।
জানতে চাচ্ছি বাইরে যাওয়ার সিদ্ধান্তটা বন্ধ করলেন কেন? এই ট্রেনিং এর পর নাকি আপনার নিজস্ব কোনো চিন্তা ছিল?
না, এই ট্রেনিং এর পরেই আমার বাইরে যাওয়াটা বন্ধ করছি। তখন আমি যখন কাজে যেতাম তখন আমার মানে যে সর্দার দ্বারা নিত একজন, ওনারা ঠিক মতো টাকা পয়সা দিত না। দেখা গেল আপনার মানে চুক্তির মাধ্যমে যাইতাম অনেক জায়গা, তখন দেখেন 5,000 টাকা চুক্তি হইতো, তখন ওই জায়গা ওনারা টাকা মাইরে দিত, সম্পূর্ণ টাকাটা আমাদেরকে দিত না।
অনেক ধন্যবাদ হেলাল ভাই আপনাকে। রোজিনা আপা এবং হেলাল ভাই দুজনকেই ধন্যবাদ, এবং আমাদের সাথেই থাকুন। অনুষ্ঠানের একবারে শেষ পর্যায়ে আপনাদের কাছে আবার আসবো।
ধন্যবাদ।
Okay, dear audience, let me translate for you. As you see that we have got two different scenarios of these two climate migrants. First one is Rosina Akhtar, who is still migrating 6 months on and off. And she has have experiences on devastating impacts of climate change. And as she mentioned that before Sidor and Ayla, her family used to work in other agricultural field, but in the same village. But last 10 to 12 years, due to the changing pattern of climate, agricultural land, houses, fisheries, livestock, everything got affected. And some of the landowners who used to have the agricultural land converted into fish cares, and people like Rosina lost their job. And Rosina doesn't have any technical skill to switch to off from activities other than this labor intensive work, like she shared that working in the brick lane or rickshaw pulling or pulling van and etc. And so she and her family decided to migrate in adjacent cities where her family has been treated with low wage rate, health problems, and other social issues which are never discussed or highlighted. On the other hand, Helal Hauladar, he used to be a seasonal migrant and almost gone through the same experience. But being a bit younger, he realized a bit early that labor-intensive work is not worthy. And at the community level, through the loss and damage funded pilot project, he participated in some awareness raising discussion on climate-induced migration. And through the skill development support, he got the involvement in the training on electrician and secured a job in his mentor's workshop in his village. As he mentioned that 7,000 per month is enough for supporting his family, even though the climate change impacts. So having these two different scenarios in hand, I would like to invite Mr. Ashish Borua, Domain Coordinator of Climate Change and Sustainable Development, Helvetas Swiss Intercorporation, to take the floor to facilitate the panel discussion to extract a bit more from the insight of these climate-induced migrants' life experiences on the Southwest Coastal Belt and quantify the required support at the source from international, national to local level. Either we can facilitate this planned migration or redirect the flow of climatic non-migrants and minimize the effects of loss and damage. Over to you, Dada.
Okay, thank you, Momita, for facilitating the first round of discussion. And I would like to start with a special thanks and big hands for Rosina Appa and Halal Bhai for unpacking the reality from the ground. Okay, so it will help the whole panelist, I expect, that to dig down a little more in this session, actually trying to focus on why questions. Why is this happening, this loss and damage? Why still are we entering around the cases of migration, I mean, especially the climate-induced migration? So in the panel, we have three guests. We have MD Samsud Doha, the Chief Executive of the Center for Policy Research and Development, CPRD. So welcome, Doha Bhai. I can see Doha Bhai, okay. So Doha Bhai, actually, for the last 2 decades, he has been a development professional with advanced research, advocacy, and activism. He has been engaged and consistently following negotiation at UNFCCC, especially on loss and damage, climate finance, climate change adaptation, and also technology transfer, as I understand, as I know. He authored and co-authored several policy papers, articles, research brief, and one I specifically would mention, that's about the CSO's positions paper from Bangladesh on the eve of COP27. So warm welcome.
Thank you.
We have Heather Maigret, the Climate Justice Resilience Fund Director. Welcome, Heather. Sorry for your evening. It's almost late evening at your end. So Heather actually has been active in the climate change community development and environmental governance for more than 20 years. She worked with several organizations, including World Resources Institute, and she has championed, especially you would like to say that challenging the power structure and shifting the power at the institutional level and made several pieces of evidence impacting positive decision for this climate change sector. So warm welcome, Heather. And we also have another distinguished speaker in the session is Professor Dr. Mizan Khan. Dr. Khan is the Deputy Director at ECAD and the Program Director of the Least Developed Countries University Consortium on Climate Change, LUCCC. He is a scholar in the environmental policy and management sector and has been working closely with the government and the development sector of Bangladesh and beyond them. He's a lead author of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, IPCC, and was also vice chair of the Least Development, LDC's expert group, which we call LAG under UNFCCC. So welcome, Dr. Khan. Sir, are you with us? We'd like to see you if you already join us.
I'm here.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Nice to see you.
Okay. Yeah.
So welcome, Dr. Khan. In fact, he is also my direct teacher and also supervisor for my MSc thesis. So welcome all our speakers. Now let's start. But I was thinking how to start actually. So such cases and stories and lives actually, it's not a story. It's the life cases of Rosina and Hela always makes us doubt what we plan. We usually should get lost if we have that humanitarian sense, that humanity within us. So I would like to start with Doha Bhai. As Doha Bhai, you have been working in the sector for a long time, and you have listened to the stories, both of them, both Rosina Bhai and Halal Bhai. So how do you see the struggles and journey of both the climate-induced people here? So how do you look at the issue using the lens of spatially climate justice? That's my first point. Second point, I would be expecting that, say, Imon mentioned in his presentation almost at the end while he was discussing that still we are busy debating, negotiating, and defining loss and damage, while there are thousands, millions of evidence on the ground. So we know that the existing unjust system, the unjust decision-making practice, and unjust accountability mechanism, both at global and national level, are often criticized. So what's your thought about it? If you highlight Bangladesh perspectives, do you think that whether we're going really effectively? And if not, actually, what should be the right actions addressing economic loss and damage, especially for this climate-induced migrants? Over to you, Dahabai.
Thank you very much. And I also would like to welcome Peter and also Migrants sir and others in this discussion. I think it's a very good topic and very hard topic indeed. When you talk about socio-economic vulnerabilities, climate justice or injustice, and how to establish justice for the people who are struggling with climate injustice. And just 2 days ago, we are talking with Salim sir, and when we are talking, then we talked that we should frame climate injustice, not climate justice. Climate injustice that is burdened by the polluters to the people in living in the south. But as we heard from Rosena and also Helaluddin, both are from southwest coastal areas, I think, and I'm sure there are many Helal and many Rosenas like this. And there are many sufferings, hard struggle of those climate change affected communities and people. And you see, when we talk about climate change, injustice, climate change impact that are being faced by Helal and also Rosina, this has been contextualized from a sudden onset event like Cyclone Sidhu or Cyclone Aila. And we apprehend that due to impacts of climate change, due to global warming, as we are, heading towards 2 degrees or more temperature rise from the pre-industrial level. So that kind of sudden onset event will be more frequent, more intense, and we are already facing that kind of sudden onset event. But my worry is that when we talk about climate change impact, we often limit our discussion and discourse to risk level. I mean, climate change is causing flood, riverbank erosion, and also sea level rise. So what are the measures of addressing those? The measures of addressing those is to have some protection measures, how to prevent the risk of those sudden onset events. So the solution is cyclone shelter, solution is embankment construction and strengthening, solution is a kind of, adaptation activities. And adaptation activities, what we do this are very closely to disaster risk reduction approach. But we often ignore the secondary and tertiary risk level. I mean, how the primary impacts of climate change and their residual impact are translating to secondary and tertiary risk level. And the secondary and tertiary risks are on people, on livelihood, on gender, on women, on indigenous communities. And we often ignore those when we develop our national plans, when we talk even in the international discourses. So when we talk about climate change, we ignore the human dimension of climate change, human dimension of climate change impact. And when we ignore the human dimension of climate change impact, then we ignore rights, we ignore justice, and we do more injustice to those people who are being once affected by sudden onset event. Again, the impacts are being extended to secondary and tertiary level and forcing them to be displaced, to be migrated, to compromise their basic human rights. And that situation is very common in Bangladesh. And I think this is a policy failure. This is our failure to convince the policymakers and to integrate those in our plan. Now, as we heard from Rosina Begum and also Helal, migration in the context of sea level rise or secondary and tertiary impact is a failure of adaptation. So failure of adaptation means when they migrate from one place to another place, as I heard from Helal, and also in first case, Rosina Begum are forced to migrate. This is unplanned migrate. This is failure of adaptation. She fails to adapt to the situation. So she had nothing to do but left the place. But some people, they cannot leave, or they are forced to back to their home again. We have seen the impact of COVID during COVID time. Many people are forced to migrate, even from, we call it reverse migrant, from Dhaka to again to the climate risk exposed areas, because the sectors in Dhaka or sectors in urban, these are very informal, and the jobs are very informal, and there is no certainty of this job. This is in informal sector, this is in garments industry. So even a small economic shock, like COVID was a big shock, but even a small economic shock, if we consider the political unrest, if we consider the, competition in global market in terms of RMG export. So if there is a competition, and if some of the RMGs are closed down, then many women workers who once migrated from the coastal areas due to impacts of climate change, they will be forced to reverse migrate to the climate change exposed areas, and they will be exposed again to those risks. So if they try to escape the situation in an unplanned way, in a fragile economic condition in urban context, this is unsustainable migration. So we heard from another case and we have seen the unsustainable migration or risky migration from Rosina, and we don't want that kind of migration, in fact. On the other hand, if we consider migration of Helal, it's a kind of planned migration. We don't expect that all the people will migrate from coastal areas or from Barin areas or from riverbank erosion areas to the urban areas, because urban areas does not have the capacities to accommodate huge number of population, uprooted population. If we consider the extent of climate change impact in Bangladesh. So what we need to do, we need to do a blended approach, balanced approach for facilitating migration. Sometimes we call it transformational adaptation, but I never think migration is a adaptation if it is unplanned, if it is forced migration. So only when we can call a migration transformational adaptation or a option of adaptation, if we could prepare them in a better way, if we could make changes in urban context, if we could make changes in the urban economic settings, so that urban economics are accepting those climate change migrants with some kind of special or flexible approach, and even a short kind of economic downturn will not make them afraid to losing their jobs. So this is not a single shot approach. I mean, not just to build some capacities of the future migrants so that they can have a job in urban context, but also to ensure urban governance so that where they live, that places is accessible to water, sanitation, other rights. They could enjoy other civic services. They are not being harassed by the neighbors. Women are not being harassed sexually, and also local administration is supportive to them. And we also need to secure their jobs in urban sectors. So my point is that yes, we could still facilitate migration through building their capacity, but we also need to do a lot of things in urban areas in terms of strengthening urban governance to make urban settings, safe and supportive to the climate change migrants. Thank you.
Thank you, Doha. Thanks for unpacking a detail more about the migration dynamics. You have mentioned about specifically unsustainable migrations where you are trying the cases from Rosina and Helal, and also planned migration in case of Helal specifically. And you have specifically emphasized on the secondary and tertiary impact, what actually we must look at. And however, whether we like it or not, you have specifically mentioned about our policy failure as well, where we're still struggling and we critically look at to a balanced approach you have mentioned. So thank you, Doha bhai. Please stay with us. We will come back again to you at the end. And I would request our participants and audiences, if you have any question, please feel free to put in the chat box.
Yes. Dada, 3 question is in chat box.
Okay, we'll be coming back with those questions later. Okay, so thanks all for those questions. Now I would like to move to Heather. So Heather, you also have listened to the reaction from Doha bhai and also have heard the stories. And interestingly, you have very recently visited Bangladesh, the southwest coast, and you have interacted with Helal as well. Okay, so first point, I would like to be happy to learn how do you react to the ground realities, the life of the worst victim of loss and damage, what you are talking about. And my second point, if we talk specifically about the, again, why questions, if we look at the climate-induced migration or loss and damage critically, we know that, okay, we have a mixed feelings about loss and damage decisions from COP27. And most of us are keeping our eyes on loss and damage fund and funding mechanism, that what the decisions are coming in upcoming days. The first meeting has been scheduled at the end of this month. However, we know that the fact and reality actually are beyond finance. We often say that it's actually rooted into the climate injustice, which Dohabai also mentioned as specific. So the failure of the existing system, the power dynamics, the different sorts of supremacy are often criticized for this current climate breakdown. I'm consciously pronouncing the word climate breakdown. So how do you see this? What are and how you think to go about shifting the power across the philanthropies, donors, government, practitioners, and also in a CCC structure and mechanism? Over to you, Heather.
Thank you very much, Ashish, and thank you to everyone here, especially Regina and Halal for sharing their experience. I was fortunate to meet Halal while I was in Bangladesh a couple of weeks ago and to see the shop where he works now. I also got to see many farm fields and places where people have been struggling to make traditional living because of changes in water availability and because of the effects of storms, which of course last for a very long time. These factors are driving different patterns of migration, and these were described nicely and exemplified in the first panel. It's heartbreaking to see some of the worst effects of climate change and to see people's lives broken, and to know that there's more of this coming if we don't make very, very big changes. The systems people rely on for their lives and livelihoods, they need significant change. An example is the need for much stronger social safety nets when storms are becoming more severe and more frequent. And for the safety nets we currently have to work much better. Many people don't know their rights and the responsibility of their governments. Many people don't know that women and men both have those rights and entitlements. It's often much harder, for example, for women to access the resources that can support them, both in decisions to stay or in decisions to migrate. And so this awareness is one of the first things that we need to see. We need people to know their rights. Then, as we look for real changes, there's a process of people coming together to build solutions for their own communities and to build voice and power together, the organizing process of people coming together to raise their voices, to assert their rights, to educate one another, to collaborate on solution sets. This is how systems change, and this is what we have been trying to support. As we think about how climate change affects people, we all know that it affects people differently, different people differently, and this is the very core of climate injustice, that in many parts of the world, the people who have least contributed to climate change are often the people who are first affected and often affected worst. And this is especially true when we think about a gender lens, for example, and the women who I met who were having to walk 2 kilometers to gather water every day because water has become less available, because rainfall is changing, because salt and contamination are wrecking their water. This is something that's mediated by gender and gender norms and women's experience versus men's. So changes to those gender norms and attention to them in the design of adaptation programs and of safety net programs. That's an example of what we see as the importance of bringing a real systems change lens to the challenges that we're trying to address. Even in the kinds of infrastructural solutions for climate change that Dohabai raised as some of the first responses we see from governments, it's really important for young people, for example, to have a say in the design of that infrastructure, because young people are going to live with that infrastructure for much longer than people who are further along in their lives. Many of these decisions that we're seeing around climate change, they're going to be long-lasting decisions. And really changing systems means changing who has a say in those long-lasting systems. I am hopeful in many respects, both from my recent visit to Bangladesh and from changes we're seeing at the global level. When I look at the recent decisions around loss and damage in COP27, I see the beginnings of some real power changes at the global level, of civil society organizing itself in places like Bangladesh, organizations like many of those on this call, coming together for powerful advocacy from places in the global south that haven't been powerful before, and asserting what's needed not only in the way cities are designed, as Dohabai described, but also bringing those voices to the global level. As we imagine communities coming up with the solutions that really work for loss and damage and for climate risk on many cases, and then building voice and power to scale those solutions within their communities and within their governments, and then finding allies in their national arena and in the global spaces. This is how these systems change. We hope that we're able to do our part at the Climate Justice Resilience Fund. We've recently had a shift within our own governance where the board of funders that I used to report to, they actually disbanded themselves, and we have created a new board that was developed through a global open call for applications. And I, as the director of the fund, I now report to a board that's comprised of people from 8 different countries all over the world, and includes women and young people and indigenous people and people who bring a real diversity of experience to the running of a fund. So this is a real shift from a fund that was run by representatives of foundations to now a fund that's run by representatives of a broad set of different practitioner and activist organizations. So we're trying to bring examples of this not only in the work that we fund in Bangladesh and elsewhere, but also in how we do our own work. This is still a beginning. It's just a start, but for change to happen, we all need to bring our own separate skills and abilities and perspectives together to build solidarity and build a movement that can shift and bring the change that's needed. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Heather. Thanks for bringing the issues. And yeah, we are getting your message. When you look into the climate injustice, why happening, you have mentioned that least contributor are most affected in the scenario. Again, we are talking about the principles where we should follow that most affected people most participated. And not necessarily you are guiding, we are bringing the evidence, how CGRF actually has changed, how shifted the power, how it has actually changed the decision-making structure. So I hope that the other organizations and actors will be influenced with these types of evidences. And for the ground, I'm taking your messages, especially when you mentioned about the voices and powers, people coming together and collaborate on the solution sets. And we would like to move forward as you also hope to change the power very near future. So thank you, Heather. I know that it's very late evening for you, Heather. So I, again, will be requesting you to keep 10 to 15 minutes, if possible, till we open the floor for the discussion. Now I'd like to move to our third panelist. So Professor Khan is with us. So, sir, you have already listened both Dohabai and Heather Megre. Definitely you will be reacting to their discussion as well if you had anything to add. And in addition to those, I will be requesting 2 points if you can highlight for us. First of all, so both as an academician and negotiator for Bangladesh, the LDCs and SAS blocks, I know that you have been part of the UNFCCC mechanism for a long time. So from your experience, how do you see the prospect of the UNFCCC mechanism on loss and damage to contribute to these climate-induced migrants we are discussing today? That's the first point. Second one, so in this current climate breakdown situation, actually, how much and how more scope do we really have to rely on and trust this existing decision-making structure and mechanism? Because we often criticize it as a failure system, as a collapse system. So do you have any thoughts of or interest in around it? Or actually, what is the right way forward? We'd like to hear you because we understand that with the negotiator, the policymakers, practitioners, government and donors, actually, we don't have enough time to wait. We must act today. And this is probably our accountability for all we are here in this platform today. So I'd like to hear your voice, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Ashish. Good to see Doha and Heather as panelists. I was listening to the interventions by the community leaders as well as our 2 distinguished panelists. As a kind of a negotiator for long years, I will focus a little on the UNFCCC process first. You are aware that this multilateral process is very time-consuming, very cumbersome and complex. Things don't move that far at a snail's pace, what I call. But at COP27, we have a decision which is kind of a little positive, but I will regard this decision of COP27 as just a political win, not yet a fund win at all. And the history of procrastination and operationalization process of the funds established under the UNFCCC used to take a number of years. For example, LDC fund was established back in 2001. The decision was taken, but it was operationalized in 2009 and 10. From 2010, just LDC fund has started funding. So, but this climate loss and damage happens every day, because not just in the vulnerable hotspots, but all over the world, you see the weather is kind of behaving absolutely erratically. And the urgency cannot be denied. I heard of the very forceful statement of Andrew Harper, the ambassador advisor to UN Refugee Agency at COP27. He was very outright that these impact displaced communities, they deserve a seat in the negotiating table, but not yet there. But if you look at the decision 1 CP27, then at least in para 22, there is the reference of human mobility and forced migration. This is kind of a steps forward. And this is just the beginning. Now, under loss and damage, there are, under Article 8 of the Paris Agreement, there are a number of agendas, but climate migration is not mentioned there directly. and instead a task force on displacement, what we call TFD, has been established. And TFD has been working a 13-member committee, expert committee, but they have still the recommendations, more of recommendatory in the sense that studies need to be undertaken further, need to understand the issues. But we already understand the issues. There are numbers, for example, from IOM or IMDC. And there are a number of research studies also. So we need now concrete actions. Now, loss and damage, is immediate. So whatever funding is available or will be made available, we need to have those funds immediately at the hands of the communities. And the centralized process also does not allow the delivery of funds directly to the community. So this is one area that at an international level, we need to build. An adaptation fund has already started thinking of how to deliver funds directly to the local communities. The GCF also has started a few pilots. So we need to think of this because if communities have resources at their disposal, particularly women, for example, then they can create miracles now. And that is shown by the NGO BRAC or Grameen Bank initiatives kind of. So now I will speak a little about the reflections. You know, UNFCCC or multilateral process considers the concerns of the parties. So the concerns of the parties can be or are reflected in the submissions that each country party does. For example, in the NDCs and NAPs, these are the two main documents that each country party, developing country party, submits. And an analysis of those NDCs showed, done by Slyke Trust, based in Colombo, that 39% of the NDCs considered human mobility and only about 30% considered climate-induced displacement. So one of my suggestions will be to have more and more reflections in our NDCs, in our NAPs, of these kind of predicaments, that this is urgent. Climate migration issue is an urgent issue, and we need to. And another problem was in those submissions that suggestions were not very concrete. So we need to do some good homework. And also periodic submissions. UNFCCC process invites periodic submissions on important issues. So each country party and the LDC group makes always submissions, I know. Bangladesh also tries, not in all issues they can or they do. But my understanding is that if all developing country parties, particularly the particularly vulnerable countries, the PVC language is there in the Paris Agreement and the Convention, then the developed countries and international organizations will factor in their decision process. And UNFCCC alone, we cannot depend on the UNFCCC process alone. It can be kind of a space where we can raise, because UNFCCC diplomacy is the most public form of global diplomacy. Diplomacy happens in closed doors, but climate negotiations are very, very open. So this is the space that we must use. But we have to work with other agencies, like, for example, Platform for Disaster Displacement or Nansen Initiative, as well as with other global agreements, like we have the Global Compact on Migration. There are provisions, but it lacks still some kind of concrete guidance on protection arrangements of these refugees. Climate refugee, we don't talk because it is a little pejorative sounding. So I personally call climate-induced displaces. Okay, and each national government, the impacted countries must also have their domestic this disaster management and migration management policies. Bangladesh government has such a policy, and there are two issues I will focus on. that our national migration policy, climate-induced disaster migration policy mentions about capacity building, which is extremely important. And it prescribes establishment of a skill development institute in every vulnerable hotspots. As we heard of Hilal, for example, his story showed that he went back to his country and got some training, electricity as technical training, and now he is earning better than moving to Dhaka, a absolutely crowded city, and slums are extremely crowded. Rosina has mentioned the inhuman conditions where she lives when she comes to Dhaka. She lives in inhuman conditions. So in situ, as a negotiator also, I argue always that in situ adaptation, as Mr. Doha has mentioned, that migration is never can be an adaptation strategy. I fully agree. We argue that migration is a failure of adaptation, as well as it can be an adaptation strategy if it is planned well. And we need to look at migration, both domestic, internal resettlement, for example, as well as external migration. But external migration, Article 14F of the Cancun Agreement had very ambitious plan, a planned relocation at national, regional, and international level. But we have backtracked from the international kind of relocation. Not much discussion about, but we need to do that. But best option is adaptation in situ. And for that, we need two things. First is capacity building, skill development training, because in Bangladesh, for example, we have now very limited land for agriculture because land is declining, agricultural land is declining because of infrastructure and also homesteads. So we need to have off-farm skill development. This is something very important before even funding. Because if funds comes and these displaced people don't have the skills to engage in, then there is no use of funds. So we need first capacity building, and then we need to allow funds to flow to them. And then I believe human agency, we need to, more harness the human agency inherent in every human being, because necessity is the mother of invention. And international community still doesn't believe much in the agency of the local communities. This is what my suggestion will be. And at international level, I'll just end. Even American researchers, Center for Global Development, Washington-based, their research showed that restriction of migrants from 2017 is harming U.S. economy. EU immigration policy is still not unified. Even Sweden, for example, or Finland, they are restricting immigration policy. So that is another outlet that displacement hotspot people, young, able-bodied young men and women can go with appropriate training in their domestic countries based on the needs of the developed countries, because their population growth rate is going negative. So they will need labor force. So we need to think in multiple ways and multi-track ways. Thank you, Ashish.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your brilliant insights. So yeah, you have mentioned our loss and damage actions on the ground, including capacity building in addition to finance and others. And yeah, what we need to do at national level, you have mentioned about the NDCs and NAPs, the national drivers, actually where we must come with the concrete suggestions and also periodic submissions so that we are on the progress. We can see how actually we are going on that. And at international, you have mentioned that, okay, when the global fund, national fund must be reach at the hands of community. But again, the current system and process actually conflicts with that. So we must critically look at that. And if needed, we need to change it as well. And yeah, you have mentioned about that loss and damage fund as a political win. We know that actually the current situation, the loss and damage adaptation must be built on the humanity as well, which gives us a broader framework than the political one. So we expect that we will all be on that tone. So thank you again, sir. Now we will open the floor. We have a few questions on the chat box as well. But yeah, before opening the floor, I would like to be back to Heather. Heather, if you have any few last note on the whole discussion before you leave us?
Thank you very much, Ashish, and thank you to everyone for sharing a wealth of perspectives and ideas in this session. I'm sorry I need to leave and go to sleep, but
Yes.
it's very late here. I think there's a lot of interesting exchange in the chat, and I hope people will have a chance to raise a lot of these issues as we think about migration and its inevitability. There's many different layers, and the more that systems can be rearranged to build the agency and the power of the local community and local people, this is, I think, is the core of the change that we need to see. We also need those systems to really be fair, to pay attention to gender, to pay attention to caste and class and the many reasons people may be marginalized. So I think that's the core thought I'll leave you with here.
Thank you, Heather, for taking those note of challenging the system and power. Okay, so thank you, Alam. Thanks again. See you.
Good night, everyone.
So now I would like to open the floor. We have around 20 minutes for the open discussion. For this discussion, I will be encouraging all to turn on your video if it is possible and comfortable at your end. I hope that our panelists will be happy to see your faces, who we will be interacting. So please feel free to raise your hand, then it will be easy for me to call one by one. I can see hand raised from Sakib Bhai. Sakib Bhai, we are happy to start.
Thank you, Ashish, and salam alaikum to everybody. My name is Sakib Haq. I'm the Assistant Director at ACAD and one of the core organizers for the Gobeshona conference. And we'd really like to thank everybody for taking the time on a Saturday. আপনারা সবাই আমাদেরকে সকাল সকাল যে সেশনের জন্য আপনারা আসতে পেরেছেন, as well as আমাদের international speakers who are probably sitting in very different time zones, had their one of them in a very odd timing from their side to join in on a session like this. So I think it was a very insightful and very rich discussion, as well as some of the questions and comments coming through. So I'll just be very brief on our side. For the organizers of the session, not just for today, but in future practices as well, echoing something that Heather just mentioned about some of the ways that community members might be more included or encouraged to participate in sessions such as this, would be to avail for language translations. So one of the things that really struck me on today, je amader session er moddhe onekgulo presentation and panelists gulo amra English er moddhe korechi, kintu amader participants shobai Bangla. তো এই পরবর্তী সেশনসের মধ্যে আই উড রিয়েলি অ্যাভেল যে আপনারা আমাদের সাথে একটু যোগাযোগ করেন, আর আমাদের কনফারেন্সের সাইট থেকে যেরকম ট্রান্সলেশন ইন্টারপ্রিটেশন সার্ভিসেস যা আমরা দিতে পারি, আগে থেকে আমাদের সাথে একটু যোগাযোগ করেন। আমরা যতটা দিতে পারবো আমরা চেষ্টা করবো আপনাদেরকে সাপোর্ট করতে। তো তাহলে এই ডিসকাশনস গুলো আমরা আশা করছি যে কনফারেন্সের মধ্যে আমরা আরো ইনক্লুসিভ হতে পারি পার্টিসিপেন্টস কে নিয়ে, specifically from members from the community, যারা একটু মেবি ওনাদের টাইম আর এক্সপেরিয়েন্সেস আমাদেরকে দিয়ে শেয়ার করছেন, ওইগুলোকে আমরা কিভাবে ব্যাখ্যা করে সবাইকে দিতে পারি। So I would really encourage the organizers to really think about what ways we as organizers can be more inclusive in our activities as well. Thank you, Ashish. Back to you.
Thank you, Sakib. Thanks a lot for the note. We'll also mark it. Okay. So, well, I see no more hands.
Dada, a lot of question in chat box.
Yeah. Okay, there are a few questions. Yeah. I think Dohawa and Migrants are also looking at these. There are some notes and comments. I can see one of the questions that, okay, it seems globally we accepted the climate-induced migration is obvious. Why not we adopt a net zero climate-induced migration policy globally? Second one, I see that how can the government ensure that climate-induced migration is seen as a priority issue in national policy-making process? To some extent, we have discussed it regarding NDCs and NAP, I understand. How can local financial institutions have more inclusive approaches for migrants? So, Mijan Sir and Dohabai, if anyone would like to take the questions and come in. And in between, I will be requesting our participants again raise your hands so follow and request discussion.
Yeah, you may come first. Apni
Yes,
action
sir.
again.
অনেক ধন্যবাদ, sir. Thank you very much. In fact, when you talk about the solutions, and I also listening from Migrants sir's comment in relation to Cancun agreement, where we had a standalone paragraph on climate change induced displacement and migration. But unfortunately, we, integrated that paragraph to loss and damage demand, because we thought that we will achieve many things through loss and damage compensation and other things. Again, we had to compromise our compensation demand, and now we have a watered down kind of text, compromise text. What Migrants are already said, it's a politically compromised text, and I'm not sure whether we'll be achieving more from this text, because if we consider the technicalities of this text, all the measures are ex-ante measures. Ex-ante measures means which are related to adaptation, mitigation, and also risk transfer, social safety net, insurance, not about post-disaster loss and damage compensation or offsetting kind of things. And we also lost our demand for displacement and migration. There are also other also distracting the agenda from the UNFCCC, and Migrants are already said a few of them, like Nansen Initiative, platform on disaster displacement, and other is under the United Nations. All are distract our demand from the UNFCCC to other platforms. And we thought that we'll be achieving more from this, but we failed. We are failing. I think we are struggling with our diplomatic roles and position, and also struggling how to win from a multi-party global negotiation. On the other hand, when we look into the national context, national issues, my concern is our government is prioritizing these issues, displacement and migration. And government in Bangladesh, we are talking only numbers, that by 2100, 27% or 30% coastal area will go underwater, 30 million people will be displaced. I'm listening that kind of number maybe since last 15-20 years. I think similar will go to Migrants also. But when you look into the country, is there any particular political agreement or political demand, political argument to address those? Nothing. One plan that has been I should say strategy that has been developed by the Ministry of Disaster Management and Relief, that was particularly focusing sudden onset disaster, and it says disaster displacement, climate-induced disaster displacement. But you know that disaster causes displacement, and migration is after this scenario. And again, when you look into the strategy, there is no proper guidance for implementing those strategies. And as it is a major problem, we need to take major decision. That is very important. Major decision in terms of how to ensure entitlement in terms of land to those displaced communities. Though we have a kind of policy directives that displaced people, particularly uprooted by the riverbank erosion, will have priority access to the khas land, because we have huge amount of accredited land. But again, if we consider the politics around land administration, there is multi-party interest, political interest of the ministries also. One ministry is trying to generate some kind of revenue out of this. Leasing out khas land to influential people, and people are doing, fish cultivation and other economic activities. On the other hand, we are depriving the climate change induced or disaster uprooted population. So if we cannot solve these policy contradictions, and also we cannot take a strong decision from the central level, we cannot ensure that the displaced communities, uprooted communities, and the people who lost everything by riverbank erosion or sea level rise will get entitlement to the resources. On the other hand, when a person displaced from his household, lost their agricultural activities, then he tried to manage his or her livelihood from natural resources. Exploring or exploiting natural resources. On the other hand, there is a major problem that natural resources, public commons, are not occupied by people. Public commons are occupied by, again, some influential persons. So there is a huge governance problems in terms of managing public commons, in terms of providing entitlements to the people who deserve it. And if we cannot solve those, the other concern like nature-based solution and also addressing displacement and migration, even locally led adaptation will fail. This will just do some word and talk. So when we talk about all those big words, locally led adaptation, nature-based solution, addressing displacement and migration, we really look into the national plans and policies, whether they are supportive and sensitive to address those. Thank you.
Thank you, Doha bhai. So before going to Sir, I would like to request Joanne bhai. Yes, we can see you. Joanne, please come.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, I think this is a very good initiative by Helvetas and organizing this such a lively and connecting people from global level to the national level, even at the ground level. So this is a good platform and opportunity to share in relation to this subject which is very much concerned these days, I can see. And Doha bhai already mentioned all about the reality as well as the expectation and possibility from the government. And Dr. Mizan is well renowned in this sector, I know, since long time. What I would like to just focus one of the issue, that's what actually we would like to achieve in coming decades. We had our last COP27, and how we can proceed with this agenda, that's also need to be considered. And also, I think we should focus on one or two advocacy agenda, which actually we can take forward, because we have seen from, we have learned from Rosina and we have heard from Helal that what actually they are facing. That is the one of the small example among the total 19 districts in the coastal region in our country. So I think through this discussion and the process, we should be able to come up with a solid agenda for advocacy and influencing at the national level as well as the local level, because many things are discussing, and so we are also searching. Let's see how we can come up with this. This is my opinion in this very learned groups. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Doha. So, Mizan sir, would you like to come in?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, further to what Mr. Doha and Mr. Dubai have mentioned. Yeah, first I'll refer to the climate injustice. Yes, absolutely right. And this remembers me of the book that Amartya Sen has written, The Idea of Justice, published in 2010. His argument was that we basically live in an unjust world, and the South Asian context too. And this unjust world structure is reflected and reproduced at the national level. Okay, so what we may do is not to talk of, as Doha mentioned, of climate justice, but climate injustice, how to reduce this injustice, both at the international and national level. If we can have a clear plan of reducing, as the Power Shift Heather leads that program, through incremental ways, but incrementalism often does not work if it is not a part of a well-orchestrated long-term strategy. So that way we can try to establish justice, try to reduce injustice, but globally as well as nationally. Now, globally as a negotiator, adaptation finance is absolutely poor. For example, African countries get only 4% of adaptation finance. And Bangladesh also is not getting much at all compared to the needs. So we need to kind of increase the amount of money to support now for loss and damage. This is because this is urgent and immediate. Now, as I always argue that money is the second need. First is we need to have some institutional structure, either community structure or regional institutional structure. Then we need training, skill development training, appropriate depending on the local endowment of resources or based on the demand at the local levels. Then only money can help. So we are shouting for money, but often money is utilized in ineffective manner. That is why let us think of some institutional structures at the local levels, local in the displacement hotspot areas, and focus on more on in-situ adaptation. We don't have a space for relocation, for example. Bangladesh is a land-hungry country. So unlike other countries, we have no space for relocation. We have to put those people back where they have been. But if the infrastructures can be built that way, then they can withstand those kind of disasters, at least to some extent. And where it's not possible, then we need to shift them to somewhere else. So this is my suggestion. And as ICAD ICAD is working on for a few years on climate resilient migrant friendly towns, where we need financial support, international support, and that is an option for the refugees, climate refugees. I don't tell these places instead of coming to Dhaka, they can move to those regional centers of growth where government has got huge investment, because the first need that a migrant needs is some kind of assured employment. And that is the key to their survival. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I can see interest from Sayyid Ahmed Imon. He has a question. Would you like to come in? Sayyid Ahmed Imon. Okay, if we can reach, then can see two questions from Fahim Tahsan from CAD. One question asked by Mahmoud Akhtar. What are the challenges faced by climate migrants and how can society address them in a sustainable way? The second question is, being a climate migrant, how does Rosina manage her HRAs during her hardship? So, Sudahabai or Migrants would like to just add in, because some of actually their experiences, challenges, how they're struggling and experiencing was shared at the very outset when they were sharing their life experiences. But yeah, if you have any points regarding that, two questions.
Thank you, Ashish, and thank you for putting the questions. I think the challenges faced by climate change migrants has been well described in the presentation, and also while Rosina and Helal is narrating their story. But again, as I talked, climate change migration is just not displacement or migrating from one place to another place. When they migrate from one place to another place, in everywhere they are forced to compromise their basic human rights. Right to food, right to health, right to education, right to habitat, right to dignity, right to clean air, all the things. So the challenges is very, very, very deep, and we need to unearth those challenges and describe these challenges and address those. The other concern is then how a society could address those. As Mizan sir also said that we cannot accommodate all the people in the urban context, because Bangladesh is urban is not a safe place. In fact, if we consider Dhaka city, Dhaka is completely unsafe city in terms of air quality, in terms of risks to other disasters, in terms of water unavailability, disaster means if we consider earthquake, if we consider livelihood, if we consider recent disasters in terms of blasting kind of things. So we should not overburden Dhaka city and other adjacent cities. What we need to do in situ adaptation. In situ adaptation means provide them with alternative livelihood, technical support so that they can live there. Again, we need to upscale adaptation activities, not only in terms of technological adaptation, but also provide them a safe house. This is very important. On the other hand, for ex situ adaptation, as we sometimes call transformational adaptation, we need to build their skill so that they can undertake plant migration, not only in the country, but also outside of the country, crossing the border in a legal way, not in a just crossing border in a legal way. This is a major concern. On the other hand, one thing struck me very seriously, that we need to understand our problem, and understanding problem is very important. And who will understand this problem? The local government authority, because local government authority is the, down to earth, down to community level organization who has the many responsibilities, in fact. So when they develop a plan, local, Union Parishad plan, annual plan, development plan, then that Union Parishad could undertake those issues: climate change impact, adaptation requirement, natural resources governance issues, and how to ensure safeguard of the people who are at the risk of being migrated or displaced. On the other hand, we need to expand technical education, demand-based education, market demand-based education, and make a bridge between private sector to the skilled person. There are many organizations doing it. Yesterday, I have visited a particular organization that is doing some good work in relation to technical capacity building and also and facilitating their job placement in urban sectors. So this kind of, but again, problem is that donor money, grants money is declining for those kind of things. That is another challenge. So even within our limited resources, with this support from government, we can implement those. Again, there is a kind of big sensitivity of government to the NGOs, to the civil societies, but NGOs are the actors who are working with the communities, and NGOs has played many potential role in the past. Still, they're playing very potential role in terms of building capacity, in terms of changing in societies, also changing in power dynamics. So a kind of support mechanism within civil societies and government is also required for a positive change and a sustainable solution of this problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Doha bhai. So we are actually almost at the end of the session, but yeah, before closing, I can't control myself to request one of the participants who were supposed to our panel speaker as well. I see a question from her. So Professor Velikovi, she's from ETH Zurich. Velikovi, I'm not requesting actually for the question. If you have anything reflect, because we have been working on these migration sectors since long, so I'd like to hear your voices and contribution. So roughly around, within 2 to 3 minutes, if you can.
Thank you so much, and I'm really, really sorry. There was a huge miscommunication, I believe. And thank you so much, all the presenters. The information and the insights are fascinating. The last speaker mentioned that, the NGOs and the government and the local authorities are going to be extremely important, right, in helping people. And my question actually, not just to you, but to all of you is, do you know what the public demand for the national adaptation plans is? Do you know exactly what people want or need in order to adapt to their locations? I was in Bangladesh for 6 weeks along the Jamuna. Most of them, obviously, they said embarkments, right? But beyond and above that, I think that we need to know, what they want, how, local knowledge could be, help to this. One of the speakers said that we need to hear what the young people want. Yes, that is true. But at the same time, they don't have the experience, the long-term experience on how to deal with the local problems. So I would like to hear your views on this public demand and what do we know?
So Mijan sir and Doha bhai, just very briefly, if we can finish within a minute.
Okay. Yeah, as I mentioned in my statement, that each and every human being has got some inherent agency. Because as Malthus argued, more heads are problems, but I don't find more heads are problems because they are born with two hands. And how to make those two hands workable, this depends on the society, on the environment that they are given to. And in societies like ours, for example, marginalized people don't have the needed minimum level need to access those kind of spaces and advantages for getting them trained. As you mentioned, those local people live in those places, hotspot, vulnerability hotspot places for years together. So they have some experiential learning. And once we go to field, we can, marry our knowledge with their knowledge because we have technical knowledge. But the local communities, particularly the old local community people, have got wisdom. And wisdom and technical skills are not the same thing. The scientists have more technical skills, but without being grounded to the ground, you do not have the wisdom. So this wisdom and technical skills need to marry on a sustainable basis. Then we can have a real sustainable solution to the local problems. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Doha, do you have anything to add on?
Yes, thank you very much. I think this is very difficult and tricky question because as she said, while she was traveling to Yamuna, then people are asking for embankment. That is the mindset of the people because people are being denied from the government services, maybe longer time. And they cannot expect that government will provide food, government will provide shelter, government will provide employment and other things. So they consider that that is their own responsibility. I mean, managing my food is my responsibility. Adjusting to the disaster is my responsibility. And also having to health is my responsibility. But what is the government responsibility? The government's responsibility is building infrastructure like embankment, because people cannot do this. So this kind of, mindset in our people has been established due to long-term deprivation from the public services. And people now cannot consider that government has the responsibility to provide those. Rather, government has responsibility to the bigger ones. That's why people cannot, and they don't talk about the other requirement in terms of addressing climate change and adaptation requirement. Again, when government is developing national adaptation plan, we have seen government is, organizing grassroots level consultation and discussion. And that discussion was with some selected participants, maybe from member of parliaments, with district commissioner, with police superintendent, with UNO, with some selected stakeholders. And they talk about very structured, very formal way. Seeing this, we organized grassroots consultation in 3 different locations. One is riverbank erosion prone areas, GMB, riverbank erosion areas. One is southwest, one is drought prone areas. And we have mobilized huge, people's opinion. And they said that particularly one consultation, they said that if we fail to address corruption in embankment construction, then Bangladesh will never be a climate resilient country. And the coastal community will never be able to adapt to the situation. The thing is that for adaptation, we are mobilizing money, we are building embankment. But again, the decision of embankment development and the place, size, and also monitoring, people are not included there. And people don't consider that they have the right to include there. And during the construction in every phases, the substandard materials are used. and in the next flood or next tidal surge, that embankment is washed away. Okay, so, and you don't have additional money to mobilize even in the next year to build another embankment. So the communities are more risk exposed even in the next year due to corruption, due to using substandard materials in embankment. These are the real talk from the communities.
Yes, and I saw that. And I observe it, but also I observe that the people do not really migrate. They shift their houses every year 50, 100, and 200 meters inland. So they keep being vulnerable exactly to the same climatic events.
Right. And the other thing, what I understand, that we should not package everything under climate change. There is a political discussion and political, trickery, I think. If we package everything under climate change, then we can shoulder our responsibility that Bangladesh is not responsible for climate change. This is someone else. So we should take support. We should, other measures to address those crises. So we should, segregate the activities, whether it's related to development, whether related to governance, whether related to institutional weakness, and what is the additionality of climate change impact. But if we package everything under climate change, then again, there is a kind of shifting or diverting my responsibility to someone else.
Okay. Thank you, Dobai. So
Thank you so much.
We're happy to continue, but if you're looking at the time, so now just before concluding, we are going back to our two speakers, two voices from the community. They have followed actually the whole discussion because we had in-person translator with them so that they can interpret everything. So হেলাল ভাই এবং রোজিনা আপু আপনারা এখনো আছেন আমাদের সাথে এবং পুরো ডিসকাশন আলোচনাটা আপনারা শুনেছেন। মানে এই আঙ্গিকে আমরা যদি বাংলাদেশ সরকার বলি বা বিশ্বের যে যারা নীতি নির্ধারক তাদের দিক থেকে আপনাদের আসলে তাদের জন্য কি বলার আছে যদি খুব সংক্ষেপে একটু বলেন। রোজিনা আপা আপনি যদি বলতে চান
বলেন।
সরকারে মনে করেন কি মনে করেন পালার জন্য পড়াশোনা দেয় এই গরু ছোট গরু মনে করেন কিভাবে বড় করতে হবে এসব পড়াশোনা দিলেই ভালো হবে।
Yeah, so Rojina is echoing again that needs of capacity development, especially for the livelihood, because that's the key concern. Helal bhai, আপনার কিছু বলার আছে কিনা?
হ্যাঁ, বাংলাদেশ সরকারের কাছে আমার একটাই দাবি যে আমাদের বন্যা কবলিত এলাকার জন্য আমাদের বেড়িবাঁধ গুলো যদি উঁচু করে ভালো করে উন্নয়নমূলক করে বাইন্ধে দিত, তাইলে আমাদের মানে বাড়িতে পানি উঠতে পারতো না, তারপর আমাদের ফসল নষ্ট হইতো না। মানে আমাদের ইনকামের উৎসগুলোই তো বন্ধ বর্তমানে। এখন এটা যদি করা হইতো তাহলে নোনা পানি আসতে পারতো না, তাহলে ফসলও নষ্ট হইতো।
Thank you, Helal bhai. So again, Helal also echoes on that actually, though he refers the infrastructural development, again contributing to the livelihood opportunities, income generating opportunities, so that again, that value also mentioned that people wouldn't like to move, they wouldn't like to migrate. So that's the key sense of that demand. So with this note, I would like to request Benjamin Blumenthal. Ben, can you hear me? Yeah, Ben Blumenthal is our country director, so we all see the whole discussion. So Ben, now it's over to you to having just your input and conclude the session for us.
Thank you very much, Ashish. Thank you all. To start with, thank you to Gobeshona for organizing this conference. ICAD and the Independent University of Bangladesh for making this possible. And of course, also thank you, especially a big thank you to the panelists and to the members of the community that gave us their inputs. I think these kind of events are extremely important to make this bridge between the communities, the needs of the communities, and academia, as well as organizations like Helvetas, who then works on the ground to try to bridge this gap. Because very often when we talk about climate change, when we talk about adaptation, when we talk about needs, it's all very theoretic. We are talking numbers. And at the end of the day, we should not forget that climate change has a direct impact on people's life. And these opportunities to hear members from the community that are directly impacted is, I think, extremely important for all of us to just to remember that we are talking about lives here. Whether it is in international negotiations, whether it is in finding solutions, technical solutions like with the National Adaptation Plan, or whether it is like Helvetas is doing, implementation on the ground. So bridging these gaps, I think, is extremely important. So these kind of opportunities to exchange, to hear from different viewpoints, different ideas, and then trying to bring them together is extremely important. And therefore, again, thank you to everybody participating here. And with this, I think I conclude. So we are already talking too much, or I am talking too much. So thank you again for everybody, also to the organizers from Helvetas for making this possible, and also to the Climate Justice Resilience Fund, obviously, who is supporting us in implementing our work. Thank you to everybody.